increase your total draw speed, you can divide it into 3 areas to work on: fast hands, fast sights, fast trigger. This video is about fast hands, which is the concept that reduces the majority of your times on any manipulation of the gun, such as reloads, malfunctions, transitions, and your raw draw speed, which is bringing your gun from the holster to full extension without acquiring a sight picture. Generally, this is the phase that takes the longest in the draw procedure, and by isolating and improving it, we can significantly reduce our total draw time at a greater ratio than reducing our time to sight confirmation or trigger press. These last 2 steps, being the quick sights and quick trigger, are the same for any movement where we come off of our sights, meaning we should be isolating these skills in dry fire or live fire to reduce the time it takes to accomplish them accurately. The hand speed, however, is normally the way to go for reducing your total time as long as you have a safe movement pattern to launch from. For instance, in a reload, we aren't just allowing our hands to fall under gravity to our magazine pouch. We're forcing our hand down at lightning speed to access the new magazine and bringing it back up at lightning speed to the index point of the magazine well in new magazine. Once we've inserted that new magazine, we're reacquiring our grip and picking up our sights quickly so we can press the trigger quickly. Remember, this is a game of tenths of a second, and having a quick and accurate first round out of the gun is arguably the most important skill to develop for reality. So let's get into what that looks like to use our hand speed to reduce the total time of our draw. When we become confident with our draw stroke and we're no longer having issues with safety infractions, it then becomes time to speed up the draw stroke and get hits on target quicker. Obviously, a large component of a quick draw is quick hand speed. We need to make sure we're fast onto the gun and fast out of the holster to obtain that sight picture. A way to work on this is with that de-escalating par timer and working some stupid fast par times into your dry fire. If you're feeling some choppiness in your draw, it's a good idea to get on the film and watch your draw in slow motion to see the hiccups. You can also work your draw in reverse, starting with a good sight picture up on target and working back into the holster. Your hands should basically come off the gun in the same point where they're marrying during your draw stroke, and you shouldn't see any hiccups coming back to the holster either. This is because the most efficient line that you can draw from your holster to a perfect sight picture should be the same going back into your holster. There will be, however, a slight difference when you're going back into the holster versus the angle when the firearm comes out of the holster, because we're dragging that front sight to attempt to slingshot the pistol forward. We're going to work these speed draws in a static position at 7 meters on an A-zone target, and we're going to work from that index point on the holster. Right now I'm running with my hood down, just using the ALS button on my holster, and we're going to try to keep the times underneath 1 second. That's a 0.94. So you can see as we're slowing this down, what happens is my hand comes up quickly to the holster, I get a good first and final grip, and I come quickly out of the holster, dragging from that most efficient line diagonally up to my sight picture. The trigger is being prepped on the way up so that I'm not waiting once that sight picture appears and I can press the shot quickly. Now, if I'm getting repeatable hits at about a 0.94 on target, I do want to push the pace until I start missing. Once I start missing, I've found my line in the sand where I can set my par timer for dry fire and push the pace. You can see at these speeds that we're prepping our trigger on the way to full presentation, so we're not wasting time at full extension, prepping our trigger to that 90% point. Some of our time during the draw is also going to be equated to our reaction to the stimulus. If we're running off of a beep, a good rule of thumb is to have our first and final grip established or touching the gun prior to the beep being entirely completed. Meaning that when the beep occurs, we want to try to have our movement started on the B instead of at the end of the beep. It's a 0.84. And a 0.73. So at this distance, the ability to slap the trigger quickly to the rear greatly assists in speeding up your times. At this distance, I can take my finger off the trigger and pull straight through the trigger as fast as I can with my finger without it disturbing my sight picture outside of an acceptable A-zone target. Now, if I go past the 10-meter mark on an A-zone target, I have to start slowing down my trigger press to land repeatable hits. A way to practice this is to draw out and obtain a perfect sight picture with your finger off the trigger but inside the trigger guard. Once the timer goes off, pull the trigger as fast as possible to the rear while still landing your hit on that acceptable scoring zone, which looks like this. Finger in the trigger guard, off of the trigger. Press the timer. 0.17. I'm gonna try to do this left-handed for you so you can see the trigger better. Okay, so that's a 0.23. What we're trying to accomplish with this drill is to show that we can have an aggressive and quick trigger pull while maintaining our hits on target, as long as we have a good grip and a good sight picture. If I slow this footage down for you, you'll likely see that there's quite a bit of wobble induced from that quick trigger pull. But once we determine how much our gun moves under the worst circumstances in terms of sloppiness or pre-anticipation flinch, based on our target size and target distance, it opens up a whole new window of speed in your shooting ability. Remember, with a retention holster, we can't utilize that scoop draw. We have to come over the top of the gun, deactivate the retention, and push into the holster to get that good grip and rip it out of that holster in that diagonal line. We're gonna switch to a simple friction holster now, and we can start working that scoop draw. For me, I'm trying to go for my index point and use my middle finger to drag along the bottom of the holster until it hits the trigger guard, and pull with my 3 fingers. Once I get that grip, I'm pulling the gun and starting to wrap my thumb around as it comes out of the holster. First, let's run this at a reasonable pace so you can see the benefit of coming out of the holster quicker and having more time to obtain the sight picture on target. It's a 0.84. Now let's push the pace on that and try to get to stupid fast speed. 0.69. We can likely get down to about a 0.62, 0.63, but that's getting to a very unrepeatable zone. Getting first round hits at this speed has a lot to do with your natural point of aim in a static position and your ability to point the firearm where your eyes are telling it to go. If, for instance, this target was down on the ground and I now had to use some muscle tension to aim in a position where my natural point of aim doesn't want me to go, it may take more time and reduce my repeatability on target. It's a good idea to differentiate your raw draw speed from your ability to obtain a sight picture on target. Your raw draw speed is coming from holster and firing into a berm before we've actually confirmed that sight picture. Confirming the sight picture for me generally takes about 0.2 seconds. So when I'm looking at my times in the 0.90 range getting hits on target, my raw draw speed to get the gun to full extension is likely around a 0.7. A good way to figure out how long it's taking you to confirm that sight picture during your draw stroke is to run a repeatable speed and get a good average off of about 10 draws, and then do your raw speed from there. There's also going to be differences in your raw draw speed with a retention holster, a scoop draw, or an over-the-top grip on the draw. Let's take a look at that. This will be a scoop draw into the berm. That is a 0.53. We're gonna go over the top now. 0.72, so almost 0.20 difference between the scoop and an over-the-top grip. Now, if I were to add that 0.20 seconds that it takes to obtain my sight picture, I'm looking at a 0.92 to get repeatable hits for me on target at 7 meters on an A zone. If I look at the scoop draw, if I add 0.20 on that, I'm around a 0.70 to 0.75 to get repeatable hits on target with the scoop draw. It's also important to make sure that in dry fire and in live fire that we're obtaining a good first and final grip and we're maintaining that all the way to the full extension so that we're not cheating that raw draw speed time. If we're getting crappy grips on the way up and we're pressing the shot on that, we're likely not going to hit the target when we start adding that sight confirmation. Getting these times is also very valuable data for us to have in dry fire because it's a lot simpler and easier for us to work on pushing our raw draw speed down than it is to work the full process. For instance, if you look at someone who has an average draw speed of say 2 seconds, it's very unlikely that they're using the majority of that time to align their sights. It's more likely that their raw draw speed is slower, which is pushing their time total up. Simply focusing on your raw draw speed can give you very quick results in reducing your total draw time. Now I'm going to switch back to my cool gun and we're going to see if that raw draw speed has any relevance. See if we can maintain that 0.90 average on 5 draws. .98, 0.93, 0.95, 0.92, 0.90. Now just for the giggles, I got one round left on my magazine. I'm gonna run my raw draw speed while my natural point of aim is focused on that A-zone target, and we're gonna see what happens. There's a very high likelihood that I'm going to miss the target, but we can see that if I have a good natural point of aim, I'm gonna be in that general area, and all I need to do is make a micro adjustment to my grip to align that sight picture on target and get the hit. Hopefully this is going to be looking around the 0.70 time for my raw draw speed, because when I add that 0.20 seconds for the proper sight alignment, it's then going to show that I'm getting those repeatable hits like we just saw. All right, that's a 0.72 for my raw draw speed, and I went high left. So I missed, but I can see though, as the shot went off, that my sight picture was high left on the target. So to confirm that sight picture, adding that 0.20, that gives me a 9.2 for my repeatable hits on target. This is very actionable data that we can use for our dry fire and our live fire to be able to distinguish between where we're costing our time.
For instance, if my raw draw time is 1 second flat and it takes me 2 seconds to land a round at 7 meters in the A zone, then it's taking me 1 second to find my sights, and I likely need to work on my sight acquisition, which is something I can simply work on by pointing my firearm at objects in my dry fire area from the high ready position instead of the holster to maximize on reps. That's because this issue isn't with the draw, but with finding the sights. I can then film some of my draws to see my reaction time on the beep, along with my hand speed and sight acquisition to see if there are any weak links.
Speeding up our sight picture really comes from the ability to point the firearm at an object and have our optic or our iron sights almost entirely aligned to begin with. Then we just need a moment to make a micro adjustment or to confirm that they're already on target before pressing the shot. And if we remember back to the stance lesson, our natural point of aim is different from our ability to point the pistol. We got to practice pointing at different heights, angles, body positions, distances, so that we can build that relationship between where we're telling the gun to go and where it actually goes. .24. The basic components of shooting something fast. Fast hands, fast sights, fast trigger. Fast hands assumes that we have quickly established a good grip to give us some extra wiggle room to apply the fast trigger, which is the process of breaking the trigger in one quick movement with little to no disturbance of our sight picture. A simple way to isolate this step is to get a timer and difficult target. Get your sight picture on target and hover your finger over the trigger without touching it. On the beep, press through the trigger as quickly as you can without disturbing the sights. A good goal is to break the trigger in the same time as your average reaction time, which generally is around 0.2 seconds. This can be done in dry fire as long as you are calling your shots honestly. You can then push the skill development by increasing the difficulty to the degree that the shot would be difficult even with no time pressure. Remember, this is a contextual skill to press right through the trigger at rapid speed and doesn't necessarily remove the need to also excel at the principle of preparing the trigger to its 90% or more before slapping the rest of the way. But it is a great way to ensure that we have the skill to slap through more than 10% of the trigger if necessary, and that we will do it under control with our grip ready for it. Again, with inside the waistband draws, the same principles largely apply. It can't be overstated that for a quick draw, we need quick hand speed and straight lines. The closer we can get to a straight line from the holster to the perfect sight picture, the more efficient our draw will be, and generally efficiency builds speed. With inside the waistband draws, clearing the cover garment is the most difficult portion of the movement. We need to figure out a way to clear the garment consistently and keep it cleared while the gun is accessed and removed. Of course, with the variable of a cover garment, we may end up snagging the garment during the movement, as the garment isn't always in the same resting position, we've got it caught on one of our digits, or we've screwed up the time delay between clearing and accessing. There are some things we can experiment with in regards to reducing those issues. Changing the time delay between clearing and accessing can assist with allowing more garment being cleared and remaining cleared while the firearm is accessed, but this does, however, normally lengthen the draw time. We also want to be aware of where our thumb is hanging out on the draw stroke. The further it is removed from the grip, the more chance it has of snagging. During these inside the waistband draws, we're certainly building our grip as we go, which is kind of like the scoop draw on an outside the waistband rig. You'll see here that I'm not working with the timer either. Sometimes to speed up, we need to isolate that movement outside of our reaction time, because that reaction time is something that's causing our issue.
But remember, we want to do this in an honest and focused way in dry fire so that we have good building blocks to push off of and push the pace. Remember, think first and prepare.